Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm the Campaign Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today, we're going to be talking about how to save big money by blending traditional and immersive learning. This session will be recorded, and we will email a copy of it out to everybody who has registered, so you can look for that in your email later today. We'll also be posting a copy of this on our site. So if you'd like to view that or previous webinars, you can go to blog.elearningbrothers.com. You can also find lots of tips and tricks there for all kinds of different tools and different tips and tricks for e-learning. If you have questions during this webinar, please do use the questions panel. We'll be ready to answer your questions there. It looks like a couple of you have already found that. So that's part of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just select questions and you can type what you need in there. We may answer those in that questions panel, or we may bring those questions up to our presenter. So speaking of our presenter, we have a great guest today. We've got Sergey, the CEO and founder of BranchTrack. Thanks for joining us, Sergey. We're excited to hear what you have to share. Also in the background, we have John Blackman, the brain behind CenarioVR and the CTO here at eLearning Brothers, ready to take your technical questions also. So don't hold back. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time and the screen over to you, Sergey.
Thank you. It's great to be here. All right, excellent.
Looks great.
Okay, yeah. Let's start first. First of all, well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to see that there's close to 100 people today to listen to actually a real-world case, and I must say this is a first case of using CenarioVR for a real project, and it went like. Spoiler alert, it went surprisingly well. So I'm here to tell you. Also, I will tell you a couple of lessons learned. And if you have any questions at any point in time, just throw them at me through John and Andrew. All right, so a couple of words about myself. My name is Sergey. My surname is unpronounceable for anyone. So since I'm the only Sergey in e-learning world, let's stop at that. Let's be on the first name basis. All right, so I started my own e-learning company about 11 years ago. I started as a CTO there, so I was the technical guy behind everything. And I've worked with pretty much every authoring tool out there and every LMS out there, and I've debugged the incredible amount of SCORM packages and whatnot. With time, I gave my CTO responsibilities to others, to our current CTO, and became kind of more of a strategic partner, only choosing to get involved into the fun, most innovative projects. And that was actually one of those projects where we had a chance to actually use CenarioVR for a customer. This is half of what I do. The other half is being a CEO and founder at BranchTrack, which is a online platform for building scenario-based training. It's part of Electora, and Electora is part of eLearning Brothers. So if you have access to Electora, BranchTrack is actually built in both into Electora Inspire and Electora Online. Go check it out. But that also kind of gives me the product management kind of perspective onto things. So I'm not just using e-learning authoring tools. I've built at least one. So okay, let's talk about why we needed CenarioVR and what was happening in general. So our customer, which we cannot officially name, unfortunately, they have not signed the release yet. I really wanted to, but trust me, they are one of the world's, or maybe the largest classification society, which actually means they do everything from risk management to certification to tech supervisory. Pretty much anywhere that comes near a ship or any sort of vessel in gas and oil platforms and so on. As part of that, they do something that's called the offshore container survey. And containers, offshore containers, are pretty much what you see on every truck rig, what you see on ships and so on, only much bigger and not always as standardized. There can be a million different types of those, and every container is built to order pretty much, and they have to be very carefully surveyed and checked by specific, trained inspectors who will certify that that thing can actually go on a ship and not kill anyone in the process. And that is, of course, a super important job. And there are a couple of hundred people in that company who do that. And they essentially are like, international spies flying from port to port, from factory to factory, depending on where the containers are being produced. And they certify everything from paperwork to metal that is used in production to the process of production to testing. Which is very interesting as well. How they test the containers? They actually hang them in the air, load them to maximum capacity, and then drop them. And if it breaks, it's a bad container. If it doesn't, it can go on a ship. Most of the training that they were doing was very much classic classroom. So a guy who has surveyed 1 million containers will train a guy who has not surveyed any containers. They will go together hand in hand onto a factory. They will go through millions of slides of presentations, and that takes enormous amounts of time, both for people who are getting trained and, more importantly, for people who do provide that training, because they have a more important job of actually surveying those containers. And for this case, as we always do, we have selected a motto. This is actually something that we've started doing recently. So for every e-learning project that we do, to get this common vision of what we're actually trying to achieve, because every e-learning project is a little bit like a small marketing campaign, we chose the motto of qualification and confidence. And while qualification is kind of a standard part in e-learning, then embellishing people with confidence, like giving that confidence to people that after they've spent X amount of hours in front of a PC, they can actually go to a factory and do an important job that can potentially lead to life loss or injuries or damages. That was an important part of what we were doing, so we've put it into the motto. And the point of this whole exercise was not to just transform a classroom like real-world training into online, but also increase the quality. There was a lot of problems with consistency of that training because there were many trainings and so on, but also equally on cost. All right. Hope that makes sense. Now, there were like 3 main challenges. First of all, the amount of information was incredible. Like you can imagine, it's checklists and paperwork and standards and certificates and regulations and so on. So there was enormous load in terms of instructional design of how we actually do that. But today is not the day when we talk at length about instructional design. Now, at the same time, it's not just paperwork, it's something very tangible. There are those huge, heavy things being shipped around and loaded and unloaded and so on. And you have to get a feel for that and not to be overwhelmed when you actually go into the field and try to and see those things. So we had to add this learning by doing part and also this emotional part, right? Because it's a job with a lot of responsibility. So we had to make sure that emotionally people can feel themselves ready to go and do their job after the training is done. So they don't need any more prepping up, and that was an important part. And that is actually where CenarioVR probably gave us most value in that sense. All right, so question, did it all go well? Answer, yes. It took us about 4 months to work about 1,500 hours. You can multiply this by whatever your own hourly rate is and kind of see the size of this project. We had quite a few site visits. We had to go to a few factories. We had to meet with people and then sit down, flying around. Those were the times, right, when we could fly around. And we also killed a drone. When I say we, I mean I did. So as a result of the project, we've saved about 5,000 in travel costs per person. Let's say there are about 200 people per year going through that training, and that gives us about $1 million annually that training saves. And trust me, that was just in terms of cost, that was just a fraction of the amount. We've also decreased the amount it takes for someone to get to surveying containers after they've been hired, because previously they had to sit around and wait for an opportunity for someone to take them to a factory to do the tour, to do the training, and that can lead to quite few weeks easily of just sitting there, reading through manuals and not actually doing your job. And then, since this whole thing was the very end of last year, I think we've completed in December, there was an unforeseen benefit. It turned out that now this company is very much prepared for COVID pandemic that is happening, because no one can travel anywhere. And this training is now available to much more people, and we're waiting until we can travel again to build more of that kind of training. So, and I'm really happy that we actually finished before, because otherwise that would be just another unfinished project. It really relied heavily on site visits. All right, so in terms of tech, right? So there are a few parts in this blend. First of all, we built everything on top of BlendedX. BlendedX is like a, let me actually show you real quick. BlendedX is this, right? So this is a minimal learning management system which allows you to blend both online training and classroom activities, and things like mentorship and so on. And this is the customer choice. They use it for everything. Then Articulate Storyline, again, a great tool, but it's a choice by the customer, because they wanted to have the source files to maintain them. So we had to build it in the tool of their choice. Otherwise, we would have probably chosen Lectura. Then ScenarioVR, which is something that we wanted to try for a long time, and finally we got a chance. Then lots of checklists and videos of all sorts, from demos of how stuff is done to just talking heads explaining stuff and so. Here are a couple of screenshots. That's BlendedX, and that is an example of a slide, of just a classical e-learn. Then tons of checklists, some of them interactive, videos of talking heads and so on. Documentary videos where people are loading and unloading stuff. This is a container which is about to be pulled up and then dropped back. Very exciting. And this is where the drone died. Filming at location. We had to actually go to that steel mill, pretty much, which produces those containers, where everything happens, and film around like a real film crew. That was a lot of fun, but the problem was that there was a lot of steel, which is to be expected at a steel factory, and drones don't like that, because they start glitching and they cannot calibrate their sensors, and then they get lost. But we kind of overcame all problems, and we made a great little movie. And then I decided that since I'm a cool drone pilot now, I want to fly a drone under a metal roof in one of the warehouses. And about 20 feet in, the drone lost all connection to everything, because it was now surrounded by metal, and crashed into a wall and then dropped. And that was the end of it. This is how I got myself a new drone. That was a rental, and now it's mine. Black Hawk Down. So and here's the ScenarioVR. You can see the factory in the end. You can also see the graphics. We have created our own little graphics, nothing too fancy, but frankly, I think that creating your own graphics for ScenarioVR gives that a little extra flair. You can use customer colors, and I think the default icons are a little bit too simple. So our designers said that they want to design their own. And also there are a few kind of action icons that we had to design, like things like look at this, click at that, drag this, drag that, and so on. One thing about 360 projects is that, well, they have a 360 degrees field of view, and that means they see everything. And I was standing right there where this picture was taken, and someone came up to me and said, look, can you please film the container you're supposed to be filming, and do not film the other thing, because the other thing is something like super secret and military. And I said, of course. And I turned away the camera to point it at the container. Of course, the back of the camera immediately pointed at the secret thing. But those guys were happy with me doing that. And they probably didn't understand how 360 works. But we will do today. And in the end, we had to kind of blur it out to complete invisibility. So this is not a little dust storm in the back. It's it used to be some super secret military thing that they were building there, and we can't film. And that was actually one of the problems. Like, those cameras see everything, but we'll get to that. All right, so let's start with the choice of tech. Once we decided that we want to use CenarioVR and do the 360 photos, we needed a 360 camera, right? Why CenarioVR, by the way? So one of the great advantages that we see is that it's a software as a service, so it's web-based. You don't need to install it anywhere. So you can have developers from multiple locations like doing stuff. So you can have designers working, just basically sharing a password and just adding icons, and then someone else goes in and adds pictures, and then someone else goes in and proofreads everything, and that speeds up things incredibly, right? As compared to anything they would need to install, or going through sending files back and forth and so on, because it's not that easy to take a screenshot of a 360 slide, so to say, if we call it a slide. John, do we call it a slide? A scene, right? Okay, I'll take it as a yes. Okay.
Yes, scene.
Thank you. I'm just checking, if anyone can hear me at all. So yeah, and then a great thing about ScenarioVR, which we did not realize until we tried, is that it's so much like Lectora. And we have a lot of experience with Lectora. So the concepts of actions and layers and buttons and a lot of things are very familiar to everyone who used Lectora, and it's not like it has a huge learning curve anyhow, but that was just another kind of advantage of using a tool from a company that we already know and trust. And I wanted to say that support was great or anything, but we never needed any support as well. And then there's the camera, right? So what we actually used is called GoPro Fusion, and well, I'm not using my webcam here, but I have this camera right in front of me. So it's a like standard 360 camera. There's a newer version right now available under the name of GoPro Max. You can also try Insta-X1. It's a great company, great brand. We've tried it for our test project, and I'll show you, and you will see that in terms of picture quality or anything, there is no great difference. Why we chose GoPro Fusion was because we knew we would have to film in rather harsh conditions. It's a factory, it's very dusty. We can be filming outside in the rain, because we were filming in Poland in November, and that means like 100% chance of rain. And Insta-X is not rainproof, whereas GoPro, being having that action cam pedigree, is waterproof. You can actually submerge it up to like 3 feet in water or something like that. You can also use a smartphone, right? Especially if you're doing a test project or you are on a very strict budget, you can use a smartphone to build a 360 picture, but that is not a great idea. It will look much worse, and it will take you extra time to actually create that. And you can try it, but I don't recommend it. If you are on a budget, you should just rent a camera. And I wish I had rented that camera as well, just like I rented that drone. But the reason is because GoPro Fusion is like version 1 of that camera, and GoPro Max is version 2. And I bought Fusion, and then like 2 weeks later, Max is out, and it's cheaper and better in every respect. And I'm like, I should have rented. So just rent it. And those cameras, they develop so quickly. The evolution of 360 is happening like every month almost. So if you buy something, it will probably be obsolete by the next year. All right. So here is a couple of, or not a couple, there's actually quite a few lessons about filming in 360 that I've learned. And no, there are no 360 lessons. There's less than that. First of all, tripod. The camera comes with a tripod, which is about maybe 2 feet long. And that is a very short tripod. If you put it on that tripod onto floor and take a picture, you will get something that looks like a dog's perspective on things, right? So it looks under the tables, and everyone is very tall around it, and it doesn't look anywhere near nature, right? So you have to get a tripod which is tall enough to be about 6 feet tall, because things look better from 6 feet, at least. It's the best perspective for taking those photos. The other part of the tripod is that it better be a monopod. Monopod is essentially a stick with 3 little legs at the very end, as opposed to a typical tripod. Why? Because it has smaller footprint, it's easier to handle, and it does not get into your picture. I will show you what I mean in a sec. There's something called Nadir Spot. Nadir stands for something right below you. It's a Navy term. Yeah, so and position, right? So you have to, sorry for jumping through slides. So position and lighting, right? So it's important when you're doing 360 that your lighting is consistent. So if you're doing like a tour through a warehouse or something like that, the lighting is consistent. So you have to make sure that it doesn't stand in one shot in the shadow, in another shot it's blinded by sun, or one room is lighted by natural light and another one is electric. Try and control that. And same thing goes for position. Light tripods will shift ever so slightly between shots, and that is very important for something that I'm going to demonstrate later, but just keep that in mind. This is the Nadir Spot. This is basically what the camera sees exactly underneath it. So the smaller the footprint is, the better, right? You don't want this thing to be really huge, and you have to sometimes you have to mask it or just Photoshop it out of the image if it's too distracting, or if you want your learners to actually find something on the floor, you have to Photoshop that thing out. And here in this picture, those 3 things below are actually 3 legs of a tripod, and they are in the picture, and you need to Photoshop them out. Here's an example from my own shot. I didn't have a monopod, so I had to go through every picture, and there were dozens and dozens of them, and Photoshop that out so that it looks something like this. It's not that hard when you have an even kind of monotonous floor, but if it's tiled or it's something not just concrete, it can become a problem. So you want to go from this to that, or not have this problem to start with by using a monopod. All right, hope that makes sense. Now, yeah, and you can fix that really quickly with a tool called Healing Brush. It's part of Adobe Photoshop. You can do that real quickly, as quick as just erasing part of the image, and it's a smart tool. It will just replace everything with something that looks like that same texture, and you cannot even see where it was edited. But you have to do it in a lot of pictures, and those pictures are heavy. We'll talk about that in a sec as well. Yeah, another thing is framing, right? You would think, well, it's a 360 picture, it's all around you, top and bottom, left and right, front and back. But no, in fact, there's something, about framing to say. First of all, you have to make sure that your camera is level, right? So it's not skewed to the side, the horizon is level, and you can use your phone to check and control for that. In fact, using your phone as a remote shooting device for the camera is super convenient. And you have to mind 2 things. First of all, you want that camera to face the action. Like if you're filming a container, you want it to face the container. Yes, it will see everything around you, but the quality is best and in front of the lens, and worst at the very side of the camera, where the 2 images from the front of the camera and back of the camera are stitched. Sometimes stitching causes glitches. That rhymes, actually. All right. And you don't want that to happen on something that will be important for your learners to look at. And somehow on GoPro Fusion, the back lens is what it sees what will be in the center of the image that will be exported out of the camera in the end. Let me explain what I mean by that. So on top, there's a family in front of the camera. And then there's a house in the back of the camera. When those 2 images from 2 lenses of the camera are stitched together, you get an image that you can upload to CenarioVR, and that becomes your 360 panoramic image. The problem is that if if those two lenses, if the camera looks the other way around, you will still get the same image, but the half of the family will be on the left-hand side and the other part of the family will be on the right-hand side. And in the center, there will be the house, which we can see here on the right-hand side in the backlight. And in GoPro Fusion is backwards, and it's super confusing. And what you end up with is a lot of photos where your main subject is not in the center of the image. So when you're working with previews, you don't kind of see what you're working with because your main subject is split into two parts of that image, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Does it make sense? John, do you understand what I'm talking about? I'll use it as my test subject.
Yes, I do, but I think I already knew that, so.
Well, is there anything you don't know?
There are many things.
John's been in and out of this for years. John knows everything.
Yeah, I know. I've known John for like almost 10 years, and never ceases to amaze me how much that kind of. Oh, well, anyhow, you're here, so. Right. So what I'm trying to say is that you want to keep your object in the center. It will not matter that much in CenarioVR, and you can control using CenarioVR where the virtual head kind of looks at when the image loads, and then of course you can look everywhere. But when you're just sifting through tons of pictures, it's easier if you do that. That's a huge time saver, because one of the things is working with those pictures is actually harder than I thought. I have top of the line MacBook Pro that I work with. Well, it's not new, it's from 2014, but it's a good computer, but still it struggles with those things. So a photo that camera produces is 3100 pixel by 3000 pixel, and there are two of those photos from the back camera and the front camera. So that's about 7 megabytes per photo, and that's just JPEG. It's not RAW or anything. It's a huge photo. And you take a lot of them because when you do a site visit, you don't have many chances to come back. If you do videos, the videos are huge and they go with 30 frames per second. So that's megabytes and megabytes of data per second, and gigabytes per minute. So those are huge files. Make sure that your SD cards are at least 64 megs and that they are fast enough so your camera can actually write that data to those cards. Actually, GoPro Fusion is weird. It uses technically it's two cameras glued together, so it has two lenses and it uses two SD cards, and you have to keep those identical ideally so they don't glitch. And that's a lot of information. And then you also have to store that and process that. Make sure that your computer is not just a laptop like mine, but it actually has a graphics card. So a desktop PC with a graphic card will work better. And the other problem is that the software that those guys provide with the camera is terrible. It's abysmal. It's slow, it's glitchy, it freezes, it won't start automatically when you plug in the camera, and then it will start automatically when you unplug the camera or something. It takes hours to export videos out of the camera into a way that you can edit them or upload them to CenarioVR. And I wish they had a competitor who has built a better software, but no, Insta360 is just as bad. You can do a lot with that software, but I don't know what kind of machine you need for that, and the whole internet is full of complaints. So beware. Just make sure you test everything, and make sure you have more time than you actually need to, and you don't do anything the night before. And then of course Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Premiere for video work rather great with 360 photos and videos, so you might not need that, but you will have to build a different framework. So you can skip the Fusion Studio or Insta Studio and go straight to Adobe, but that will require you to, that involves a little learning curve. Now, one of the biggest tips that I've learned from this is what I now call double tapping. You heard it here first, and the idea is that the problem is that when you are taking a picture with a 360 camera, you are in the picture somewhere. Unless you walk out of the room, or you go behind a column, or hide behind a box or a desk or something. And that takes time, especially when you are in a factory where it's either a huge walking distance to the nearest wall, or every nook and cranny can become your grave if you're not careful enough, right? You hide somewhere, and then that thing turns out to to be something that you didn't expect, and it's a place where you don't want to hide in anywhere. So what I've done instead, which saved me enormous amounts of time, is that I take one picture and then I take a few steps to the left or right, and then I take another picture, and then I combine those to hide myself. And that way I can actually hide not just myself, but pretty much anything that's moving. And let me just demonstrate that in Photoshop. So this is the raw picture. Actually, what you will work on isn't, that spherical, it's typically rectangular, but it also works for this view as well. So this is one picture that I have, and this is another picture on top of it that I have taken, and you can see how I moved from left to right, and I've taken the same picture from the same spot. Now, what I need to do in that top picture, I will take my eraser and just erase myself. It doesn't have to be neat or accurate, like just make a hole in that picture, make sure that you cannot see Sergey. And then I will enable the bottom picture, and now that part of the bottom picture right here on the right hand side is visible through that hole in the top picture, and the combined picture, when you flatten it, is just an image without any people in it. And imagine having a car driving in the background and picture one on the left hand side, right hand side, and then the left hand side. Imagine anything moving like that. By combining two or more pictures, you can actually achieve the empty room look, even if you're taking pictures in an office which is full of people. Maybe not like hundreds of people, but if you are doing this in a museum or some sort of a facility, you can just ask someone, hey, can you keep doing what you're doing, but just take 5 steps to the left, and you take another picture, and then you Photoshop it like that. All you need to do is to overlay them and make a hole in one of them, and that's it. But it's important for that to happen, for those pictures to be identical. So if I make this picture just a little bit wrong, if I move the camera between taking those shots, you can start seeing how you can see a little bit of that border. So let me move it a little bit more, and you'll see what I'm talking about. See that you can start seeing this problem. And again, when you are not in a factory full of concrete, that is even worse, because even tiny detail will stand out. So you can have something like this, door doubling, or these lines not aligning properly. So it's important to keep the camera steady. And for that, you need a steady tripod. Remember, I was talking about tripods, or monopod for that matter. And that is a huge thing. Like, instead of hiding and playing this hide and seek, you just take 2 pictures, and your site visit is much faster. And that additional work in post, well, it is additional, but it's something that you can do out of the comfort of your office, not on site. Another thing is that those 3,000 pixels, I don't know who needs those. Like, frankly, we've tested quality on different devices, and if you just resize that huge 5,000 by 3,000 pixel image into just 1080p height, that will be enough, even more than enough, right, for all intents and purposes. Also, make sure that you save everything as a progressive JPEG. In case you don't know what a progressive JPEG is, it's this. So on top, we have a non-progressive, which loads from top to bottom, and you have to wait until it loads entirely to see the entire picture. The bottom one is progressive, so it loads kind of the blurry version of itself, and then less blurry version, and then even less blurry version, and then it becomes whole again. But you can actually see and manipulate the whole scene, the whole space immediately, right? So it's not just about loading cats faster, but it's the fact that your images will load faster. All right, we're almost at the end of it. So assembly in CVR. Since I wasn't the one who was assembling the actual project, all I did was a test project that I'll show you in a sec. When I was invited to do this talk, I went to my CTO in Intea and I asked him, like, do you remember anything about that project? Like, what were any problems or any tips or tricks? And he said, I have not heard anything from the developers about CenarioVR, and that is a good sign. This is the best testimonial to CenarioVR. Like, we never had any problem assembling anything. I assume that you might run into a problem when doing this or that and so on. I can't, so it's not a super complex project that we've built, but still. One thing that you have to know, it requires a rather powerful machine. It does deal with a lot of layers and in 360 and large photos and so on. So you can't do this on a very old laptop or something. So keep that in mind. You also have to strike the balance between doing a lot of little scenes with just a couple of buttons in each scene, and or doing a few scenes with lots of buttons and layers and actions and conditions. Lots of scenes will make for a larger project. Heavier project takes time to load and jump from scene to scene. Cramming everything into one scene works nicer in terms of user experience, right? So they don't have to jump from page to page, but it makes your job as a developer harder. And I think everyone has had the same dilemma in Lectora. Like, do I do this pop-up as a separate page and then jump back, or I do it, a nice overlay and so on, but then I have to deal with a few layers in my slide or, in case of Lectora, page. So, but that is also very important in CenarioVR. Custom graphics, right? I think that the basic graphics are a little bit too simplistic. So, and if you're using CenarioVR to actually put that cherry on top of your learning project, and you want to impress your customer with 360 and so on, you also want to actually go ahead and use better or richer graphics. I'll show you what I mean by that. And yeah, this is something. We are kind of Lectora professionals. We know how that works. So when we took CenarioVR, we thought, okay, like actions, layers, like everything's familiar. Let's do that. And we've built rather complex slides with variables and points where you have to walk around the container like 4 times to do 4 different sets of exercises, and you get points and stars and whatnot for interacting with that container, and you have to read all the numbers and can compare it to the documents which also pop up in front of you when need be and so on. And that was a little bit too much. We wish we made it a little bit simpler, because at one point, maintenance became just too important. The customer will not see much difference between a very complex CenarioVR project and a simple CVR project. They will probably just say, wow, this is VR, this is amazing. And you might save yourself a little bit of time and kind of pace yourself before you are really familiar with the tool. There is some learning curve. So don't assume that, if everything looks familiar, that, it will be just as easy as the tool that you've been working in for 10 past years. Yeah, and also mind the user experience. Just put yourselves in the shoes of those people that you're working for, the learners, and try to imagine how will they see this thing. They are not as tech savvy. They are not playing with VR every day. And one of the things, for example, that we found is that if you put a text prompt off to the side, people will try and scroll that text into view, and by doing so, they will learn how to scroll and look around. Whereas if you compare it to a text right in the front, some of the people will not even understand that they can actually scroll around and look around. They will just assume it's a static slide, a picture, and that's it. So you need a little bit more hand-holding and use those subtle tips to actually prompt people to look around and scroll around. Sometimes you can just write on screen, like drag your mouse left and right to look around. You need to keep in mind that this is something new for your learners and something that they haven't done before. Yeah, be mindful of that as well. Yeah, and here's an example of those, nice clicky icons and whatnot. All right. So if I have to sum this up in one sentence, then that was a very hassle-free way to add immersion and emotion into our course to bridge this e-learning to real-world examples. It wowed our customer, and it was surprisingly, I must say, easy for us, given that this was our first project. So that's it. I'm ready to take the questions. Here's my favorite slide, by the way. So absorb what's useful, discard what's not, add what is uniquely your own, and every success in your VR journey or otherwise. And yeah, thank you. Do we have any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Sergey. We don't have any questions here. There is a small change to something that you had said earlier about memory card sizes. I think you had mentioned 64 or bigger, and that is in gigabytes. So 64 gigabytes or larger would be great.
Yes. Did I say megabytes?
You said meg, and I think that would capture.
Oh yeah, if you find a 64 megabyte card, buy it immediately and sell it to a museum or something.
That's
like it's a collector's item by this.
For sure. A lot of people are wanting to know if there's a way that they can see a demo of the project, and I think like
absolutely. Let me just show it to you right now, and then we'll see what we can share. Like I said, we have not still gotten release from the client to actually go public, so I had to rename those projects last minute to remove the customer's name. Yeah, so let me first show you real quick what we have built as a test project. So I took my car. It's a humble Volkswagen, and I went to a car park and I just did a walking tour around. So it starts, I'm playing as a car inspector or whatever. So there's a prompt and I have to approach it, and then okay, let me actually pull it into a play mode. Yep. Right. So yeah, there's those effects for the arrows and whatnot. So you have to approach a car, and we've played with different cards and so on. And you can walk around the car and so on. And you can actually get into the car as well, and you can switch on the radio and so on. So we've tried a few things before we actually went to another country with a camera to do everything and so on. So yeah, this is how you walk to the side of the car, back of the car, and so on. And I really recommend you to do that, even maybe in the safety of your own office. It will give you more information than any kind of webinar or tutorial. And it's easier to work something up before you do anything. Like in this case, I found out that my camera isn't calibrated, so everything was skewed to one side, like if I were a drunken inspector, like walking around diagonally, and then I had to fix it in post, and also found out that fixing something in post is really hard. Yeah, here's an icon that that I did for a car to click and go into the car. I don't know where it's gone now. But all right, so yeah, and here's something also that you will probably like. When I was talking about that Nadir Spot, I was thinking like what's happening, and I remember there's narration to that as well. So let me preview this, right? So here's a tripod which is trying to simulate a driver, and you can place a logo in the Nadir Spot. We checked that, and it turns out that it looks absolutely terrible. Don't do that. Just Photoshop it out, and that's it. And then you can also see the whole tripod in here. And that's just something you don't want to do. And you can play multimedia and whatnot. So this is the demo project. It was super important that we do that, because we've learned a lot in a matter of a few hours.
Sergey, there was a question
about, let me show you.
There was a question from someone about how you integrate it into Storyline.
So with Storyline, like we did not put in that thing into Storyline. Everything is assembled on the level of BlendedX. So in BlendedX, you can create lessons, and within every lesson, you can have, let's say, a storyline object. Just a zip file that loads a story. Oh, I signed out. Sorry. So imagine this is an LMS, and you upload a separate zip for a storyline module, and then a separate zip for a 360 module, something like that. So this is a storyline launching, and it's just a classic storyline, with just texts and explanations and whatnot. And then there's a separate visual inspection module which you launch, and it opens the CenarioVR project. And this is actually where you start. So navigation, we are in a factory right now, and we can go ahead and find the container that we need. Okay, so we need to check that container against that paper. We go and look at the container, and we have to, click different things about it, find out what it looks like. We need to close it. Yep, close it. There's this thing. Looks very industrial. Okay, now we are off to the side, and we have to check it for different kinds of problems. So we can look at that. Here's what it looks like, and so on. But this is a visual inspection, right? There's also a test version of that where you actually go around a different container, and you actually don't have any prompt, and you have to do it yourself. And there's also videos of things happening around as well, right? So
is that exported as SCORM or HTML5 to the
HTML5? So this thing does not need SCORM projects. It need I think it takes zip files, and you get points for just completing it. Or maybe I'm mistaken, and this is what we've done for our own kind of demo area, and maybe the customer imported it as a SCORM file. I can't really say that right now. Sorry. I know that CenarioVR exports both. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. I can't say that it's a very complex project, but it has a few complexities. As you can see, every photo it will have a number of moving objects. There's a number of scenes which you have to navigate, and it's like really after you do that, and we've seen it in people, they really say that it's like I've been there. Right, and you don't even need VR goggles or anything like that for this. It gives them a much better perspective on things as compared to any number of photos.
One person had a question about your experience with 360 videos. Did you have any video portions of this?
We did not do videos. We've only embedded videos, like flat videos, where you can, if you click on something and it's moving, then a video pops up and shows you how that thing is moving. But we did not film any videos for that. And frankly, the projects that I've seen with videos, I think a lot of them can actually be done with photos, and that will be cheaper and faster, but will have the same kind of instructional value in many cases. I'm not saying always, but in many cases.
There's a couple questions of people that want to actually interact with these. If you sign up for a demo of CenarioVR, there are a couple pre-made courses in there that you can look at and interact with and see what kind of stuff you can do.
Not even a couple. There's like a ton of courses which are public in CenarioVR, and we've went through them and we use them as a reference, and that is also a great help. That's actually something that I haven't seen a lot in other tools, where you get you sign up for something and you're met with a blank space and you have to build something, right? Instead, here you have a ton of public scenarios where you can play with. See, that's like 15 pages of 12 scenarios, or maybe there's even more than that.
Yeah, and it's worth it to note that this is all being done in the browser, so it doesn't matter if you're on Windows or Apple or Linux. As long as you've got access to a browser, you've got access to CenarioVR.
Yes, that was an important, like I said, that was an important part for us. Some of our people, like I, for example, I use a Mac, so I don't want to go and find a Windows PC to interact with something that's Windows only. And also the fact that you can actually share a password between a designer and a proofreader and have someone log in and just, fix the spelling and then go back. That's also great. And also what I like, this is the Lectora pedigree, I would say. When you export CenarioVR, it doesn't do anything to the images that you use. So that zip file will contain every graphic asset that you've uploaded in the form that you've uploaded it. And if you need to replace something, you don't need to go to the actual tool to fix that. You can actually just replace the image in place if you are in a hurry and you need to really quickly fix something, like you need to I know, fix an icon or replace an icon or something like that. It's really quick. So it really helps. And this is what I like about Lectora. In many cases, you don't even have to load Lectora to change something in your project. So that we have that same thing in CenarioVR. This way, I like kind of working with that family of products, so to say.
Do you ever have to worry about the link to the course expiring?
I'm not sure what that refers to. So
I had the same question. I think what they're referring to is if you no longer have it, do you have the content? The content does not have to live on CenarioVR. In this case, he's actually published the content off of CenarioVR and it's published to another system. So it can live off of the system.
Yeah, so once you download the project, you actually have a zip file with the HTML contents of your project, and all the images, all the assets, all the fonts, everything is in there. It does not rely on CenarioVR being even accessible, so you can deliver it on an offline device. So it does not load anything from the web. So you can put it on the LMS and it's yours forever. I don't think it ever expires or anything. It's only that you cannot go back and edit it if you don't have an active license. Correct.
And she followed up with the ask if you send a link to CenarioVR. As long as you have an active license of CenarioVR, the content will always be there. If you don't have an active license, then you'd have to pull the content off and put it somewhere else that you would have an active license on to use it there.
And also, if you're like, what I like about CenarioVR, since it's subscription based, you subscribe, you build something, you deliver it, and then you forget about it until the client comes back to you, and then you resubscribe again and fix it, maybe next year when they want an update. If you're not using it very often, it's not a huge investment in that sense. You don't have to like buy a whole package, so that is quite convenient. And your courses, as far as I understand, will stay intact while your license is kind of dormant. So unless you clean them up at some point, but probably you don't. All right.
All right. That seems to be all the questions.
Yeah. So that covers our questions. I'm going to go ahead and take the screen back for a second here. Reiterate a little bit that if you guys really want to try it out, you can grab a trial of CenarioVR for free at CenarioVR.com. There's loads and loads of projects that you can play with and look at, and then start building your own. We also published a blog on blog.elearningbrothers.com that talked about some other ways to do the VR capture. If you don't have a GoPro Max or some sort of 360 camera, there are ways to get around that. Especially if you're just testing it before you're ready to invest any money into VR. So by all means, check that out. Thank you, Sergey, very much. Thank you, John, for helping out as well and giving lots of answers to some of these technical questions. We hope that you guys enjoyed this webinar, and we appreciate everybody for coming, and we hope you'll join our webinars in the future. Have a great day.